One of the biggest concerns for kidnappers and criminals who keep their victims alive is how to create a suitable environment to commit the crime. Asterisk. How can they ensure victims don't escape? That no one hears their screams and no one comes to their aid. Many killers take their victims to a forest or a remote area. Many would tie up the victims in large abandoned buildings, and of course, a large number of killers kept their victims inside their homes. In today's video, we are going to Henan province in eastern China to talk about a man who was arrested in 2012 on charges of sexual assault, murder, human trafficking, and the illegal production of pornographic content. If you like this type of case, don't forget to like and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Li Hao was born in 1977 Henan province, China. With a population of over 98 million people, Henan is China's most populous province, and Li Hao lived in a crowded and bustling city from birth. We don't have any information about his childhood or family, but we know that this man worked for a time as a firefighter in the city of Luoyang. He resigned from his firefighting job for unknown reasons, and then started working for a technology company in Henan. He was a civil servant, making a living on a civil service salary, and had an ordinary financial situation. When Li Hao was in his 30s, he married a woman, and in 2011, they had a son. China has strict laws regarding the media's disclosure of the names of victims, the families of the killer and victims, and so on. Therefore, we do not know the names of Li Hao's wife and son. As I said, Li Hao was an office worker at a company and had an administrative job. In 2009, he told his wife that since his civil servant salary wasn't very high, he had found a night job to earn more money and provide a better life for his family. Li Hao's wife did not have much information about her husband's night job and only knew that her husband would leave the house for 2 weeks each month and not come back at night. In his wife's eyes, Li Hao was not a liar, considering his past job as a firefighter, his civil servant life, and his straightforward and simple behavior. His wife did not even suspect for 1% that Li Hao might be lying to her and had no concerns about it. Li Hao started his night job in August 2009. He bought a residential house in the Zigong district of Luoyang and then thought about how to make money illegally. After days of thinking and considering the circumstances, Li Hao began digging a large hole in the new house he had bought. He dug this pit alone and continued digging until the hole became a tunnel. Then he dug and dug and dug until, after a year, the pit in the ground became a relatively large dungeon. This dungeon was located on the ground floor of a residential building, where Li Hao's house was. The basement that Li Hao had dug inside his house had an area of less than 20 square meters. It started with a tunnel with a 60-centimeter opening that only one person could crawl through, and then after a few meters, the tunnel led to 2 4-square-meter bedrooms. More detailed information about this dungeon has not been released, but we, who have read and investigated a lot of kidnapping cases together, know that dungeons must have an air ventilation system. I guess Li Hao used a number of fans and pipes to circulate the air inside the dungeon, because if he didn't have an air ventilation system, anyone who entered these rooms would die of suffocation after a few hours. Also, in a photo that has been released of the entrance to the dungeon, we can see the air purification pipes. Li Hao had thought a lot about how to earn money illegally, and finally concluded that if he created illegal pornographic content and published it on the internet, he could become rich. His goal was to create a suitable environment for kidnapping, abduct a number of women, and then produce pornographic content with these victims. Between 2009 and 2011, Li Hao kidnapped and enslaved 6 women and teenagers aged 16 to 23. Li Hao's first victims were kidnapped in October and December 2009 and were named Zhang Xuan and Duan Momo. However, I have to tell you that these names are not the victims' real names and were chosen as pseudonyms by the media and the police. We don't know Zhang's exact age, but Duan was only 18. They both worked in a recreational bar and met Li Hao through this bar. According to news from China Central Television, Li Hao told his victims that he would give them a lot of money in exchange for sexual intercourse, and the victims went to his house with this man for the money. Li Hao would take the victims to his house in the Zigong district of Luoyang. He would lock the door and then, under the threat of death, would take these women into the dungeon he had dug under the ground. To make sure the victims didn't escape, Li Hao had installed 7 different locks on the dungeon doors and was at ease about their sturdiness. In December 2010, exactly 1 full year after kidnapping Zhang and Duan, Li Hao kidnapped another 9-year-old woman named Jiang Mambo, just like his first 2 victims. About a year later, Li Hao kidnapped 3 more women in 2011, bringing the number of his victims to 6. The 3 victims of 2011 were 2 0-year-old Zhang Momo, 1 6-year-old Ka Momo, and 2 3-year-old Ma Momo. Between 2009 and 2012, Li Hao repeatedly raped these 6 women. He forced them to stay in the dungeon 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He fed them once every 2 days to keep them weak and unable to escape. He provided no sanitary facilities, nor had he even built a toilet in the dungeon. The victims were forced to eat, sleep, use the bathroom, and be subjected to physical and sexual abuse in those same 2 4-square-meter rooms. According to reports from this case, the dungeon that Li Hao had built was extremely stuffy and smelly. The sanitary conditions inside the dungeon were literally catastrophic. Just think, in these few years, as a result of repeated rapes, Zhang Momo became pregnant once and had a miscarriage in such an unhygienic state. Li Hao's goal in kidnapping these women was to produce pornographic content. As a result, 2 years after the kidnapping, he installed a camera in the 4-square-meter rooms and filmed these women during sexual assault and torture. He uploaded the videos to the internet and received money from people for sharing them. The first 2 years were spent only with sexual assault, filming, and torture, until in 2011, Li Hao gave the victims computers so they could watch movies and play games. They did not have internet access, and for this reason, they could not send a request for help to anyone. Also, over time, Li Hao would take some of the victims out of the house to cheap hotels and inns and force them to have sexual intercourse with strange men in exchange for money. He was always present there and made sure that the victim would not escape or even talk to strangers. In late July 2010, which was a year after Zhang Shangshuan and Duan Momo were kidnapped, Zhang Shangshuan one day realized she could no longer bear these conditions and the pain and decided to escape. At this time, Li Hao was digging the ground and enlarging the dungeon. Zhang Shangshuan attacked Li Hao from behind and tried to throw this man into the pit he was digging, but unfortunately, she was not successful. Li Hao angrily and furiously tied Zhang Shangshuan's hands to the bed, but the victim still did not give up and resisted. She tried to push Li Hao away and hurt him with her legs and various body movements. When Li Hao saw that this woman would not stop resisting, a sinister idea came to his mind and he put it into action. He brought 1 8-year-old Duan Momo from the next room and told her that if she killed Zhang Shangshuan, she could be free and leave the dungeon. Duan initially objected, but Li Hao insisted so much that in the end, she agreed to the murder of the first victim. Duan Momo and Li Hao, together, suffocated and killed Zhang Shangshuan. Then Li Hao buried her body in the pit he was digging and covered it with cement. Li Hao, both before and after the murder, physically abused Zhang Shangshuan's body and forced Duan Momo to watch all of this violent behavior. The body was buried near the victim's sleeping area, and Li Hao repeatedly reminded them that if they ever disobeyed him or tried to escape, they would suffer the same fate as Zhang Shangshuan. 16-year-old Kai Momo was kidnapped in early 2011, and exactly a few months later in May, Li Hao discovered that Kai had a gynecological disease. The name of the disease was not written, but according to Chinese news agencies, this disease would cause Kai not to be able to participate in Li Hao's pornographic content. Li Hao told this 6-year-old that she was a useless and worthless person and of no use to him. Then he forced the other victims, with promises of freedom and threats, to beat Kai Momo. Li Hao beat Kai for about 3 months, tortured her, prevented her from eating food and drinking water, and would not give her food until she fainted from hunger. Li Hao would force Kai Momo to eat feces and drink urine. 3 months later, in late July 2011, Li Hao, Duan Momo, and the other victims beat Kai, and unfortunately, this child lost her life due to the injuries inflicted by the beating. Li Hao repeated what he had done with Shang Shangshuan's body. Only this time it took a few days to dig the pit, and the body was left in the same 2 4-square-meter rooms where the other victims slept. Between March and April 2011, Li Hao bought a professional video recording system and, by live streaming and online shows, forced the victims to produce pornographic films. He charged 50 yuan for every 30 minutes of video, and sold every 50 minutes of video for 100 yuan. I don't know exactly how many dollars each yuan was at that time, but you should know that in 2025, a bottle of mineral water in China costs 8 yuan, and every 100 yuan is approximately $14. And you should know that very soon, many people joined Li Hao's live streams, and the number of his viewers became more and more. By the time of his arrest, Li Hao had uploaded more than 50 videos to the internet and earned thousands upon thousands of yuan from enslaving a few innocent people. The term sex trafficking in Farsi means sexual trafficking. In this type of trafficking, which is considered a form of slavery, the trafficker forces victims to have sexual intercourse with clients against their will. I should say that the global profit of the sex trafficking trade, according to the International Labor Organization, is estimated at $99 billion. We can call what Li Hao did in this case a form of sex trafficking on a smaller scale. From August 2011 to the second day of September 2011, Li Hao forced his victims to have sexual intercourse with strange men in different hotels. The viewers of Li Hao's videos were increasing day by day, and many of the people who watched these videos wanted to meet the prostitutes in the film in person. Li Hao, in the same time frame I mentioned, was selling Duan Momo and Zhang Momo in exchange for sexual intercourse and making money. He was able to earn 700 yuan from this crime. Now, why did he only take Duan Momo and Zhang Momo? Because these two were more obedient than the others and feared him more. When Ma Momo saw that the other victims could leave the dungeon for sexual intercourse and see the outside world again, she started to obey Li Hao's words. When Li Hao saw that Ma Momo was listening to his words, he decided to give her a chance. Ma Momo, 23, left the dungeon on the second day of September 2011 to have sexual intercourse with a strange man. Li Hao took this woman to a hotel that he had arranged with the client beforehand and sent her into the room. Their plan was for the victim to stay with the client for one night, and then Li Hao would come for her the next morning. That day, Ma Momo woke up very early in the morning and, with all the strength she had, went to the hotel's security guards. She immediately explained the situation to them as much as possible, and these guards took Ma Momo to the police. The police, upon hearing Ma Momo's statements, went to Li Hao's house and rescued the other victims from the dungeon. It seemed that Li Hao had realized Ma Momo's escape because he left his entire home and life and tried to escape the city. Li Hao went to his sister, Li Yuan, in another city and asked her for money. His sister gave him 1,000 yuan so he could escape, but fortunately, the police arrived and arrested this criminal. Li Yuan was also arrested and charged for collaborating with a murderer, rapist, and kidnapper. In September 2011, all news agencies in the city of Luoyang, Henan province, wrote about Li Hao and publicized the man's arrest. On the 30th of November 2012, at the age of 35, Li Hao was sentenced to death. The crimes mentioned in his case were sexual assault, murder, the illegal production of pornographic content, and kidnapping. The Supreme People's Court of China upheld Li Hao's death penalty. Li Hao was fined 10,000 yuan, and they also fired him from his government job. On the 21st of January 2014, Li Hao was executed after meeting with his relatives in prison. His relatives were his 3-year-old son and his wife, who were completely unaware of all these crimes. Just think, his son was born in 2011, and his wife thought her husband was making money all this time with night shifts and hard work. This means that around the time his son was born, Li Hao killed one 6-year-old Kai Momo. One issue that came up in this case was that the two women who were killed were murdered with the cooperation of the other victims and Li Hao. The court did not know exactly what to do because the victims were also killers, and both murders had been committed intentionally. The Chinese court finally charged 3 of the living victims in the case, except for Ma Momo, with murder alongside Li Hao, but gave them a lighter sentence. According to Chinese media reports, the 2 victims were sentenced to conditional imprisonment and completed their court proceedings without going to prison. But Duan Momo was imprisoned for 3 years and returned to society in 2015. After reviewing the case, the police said that the victims might have suffered from Stockholm Syndrome. In 2011, the company where Li Hao worked told news agencies that the time between the crime and the criminal's arrest was very long, and that the local police in the Luoyang area should do something about their incompetence. After the company's statements, 4 police officers were suspended, and a plan was implemented in the city of Luoyang that required a review of every nightclub. It was also emphasized that they would soon be checking every pornographic website so that such cases would not be repeated. The people of China were truly shocked and horrified to hear about the crimes that Li Hao had committed. The first journalist who broadcast the news of the case was a person named Ji Shuguang, and when the story of Li Hao's kidnapping and murder was broadcast internationally, this poor journalist was arrested for leaking state secrets. Ji Shuguang was banned from working for a period, and no other newspaper or news agency was allowed to talk about Li Hao because city and provincial officials said that publicizing the case would damage the city's image. At that time, the city of Luoyang was trying to win the title of Model City in an inter-city competition, and the officials officially did everything they could to prevent the Li Hao case from being broadcast nationally. Fortunately, they could not prevent the details of the case from being broadcast, and it was not only broadcast throughout China but also internationally. And even you and I are now examining the case of Li Hao's crimes in Farsi. When the news of the case spread in major media outlets, the Luoyang officials immediately changed their tune, saying that no, we did not prevent the news from being broadcast at all, and so on. But it was very obvious. I don't know why these scumbags don't realize that in a time like 2012, when social media exists and news can be easily broadcast, they change their words. Later, Li Hao's case was widely covered by the national media, and the man's crimes were recounted to the people. Note that it was the national media of China, not the local media. The case of Li Hao's sex slavery is fully described in a book titled Sexual Offenders, Psychology and Control by Liu Baizhu. I was not able to find the English file of this book, and am not sure if it has been translated. And as for the building on the ground floor where Li Hao had dug this dungeon, it had other residents. One of these residents, who lives on the upper floor of the building, said that Li Hao's crimes are unimaginable. Even now, thinking about it makes me shiver.